Hey guys, this is going to be the start of our AP Government Unit 1 PowerPoint, which is going to be the foundations of democracy. So I'm just going to quickly kind of run through this stuff with you. There are a few videos that are embedded in this PowerPoint and everything. You will need to have this PowerPoint pulled up as I'm going through it. It's going to be on Google Classroom for you. And when you get to the video, I'll tell you to pause me and go ahead and play the video that's embedded in there so you can watch it as on your own. So the first thing that we're going to kind of talk about are the ideals of democracy. So we're going to answer questions like, what is democracy? And, you know, if I asked you all that question, you're probably going to think of things like rule by the people rule, people vote, different things like that. But that's generally what it is. A lot of people get ideas of things going back to ancient Greece and ancient Rome that were kind of some of the first examples of a democracy, kind of like what we may know today. But one of the things that we have to do is explain the balance between the balance of power between the government and the individual. So one of the major themes of this whole course is, do individuals or the government have more power, and why do you think that? Okay, so is it the government subjecting its rule upon you, or is it you giving your input to the government and the government doing what you want? And there's times we can think of examples when both of that is probably true. So it really does just kind of depend on how you look at it. And again, we're going to go through and talk about a lot of this stuff much more in depth as we get to the course. This is very much like the intro day to the foundations of democracy and everything. Okay, so democratic ideals, there are 5 of them: limited government, natural rights, popular sovereignty, republicanism, the social contract. Okay, and we're going to go through and talk about individually what all of those mean specifically. Okay. So I've got this meme here. You know you're a good leader when you get 100% of all votes in your totally democratic election, because we know in North Korea, they always say that, you know, 100% of people voted for the supreme leader, but, you know, it's kind of one of these things like if you don't vote or you try to vote for somebody else, they might kill you, or no one might ever hear from you. They might disappear you. So, you know, North Korea is not a good example of a democracy per se. So, the first democratic ideal is limited government. The government has to follow laws just as individuals have to follow laws, okay? The president cannot just do whatever he wants. He has to follow the same laws that you and I do, okay? Congress cannot just do whatever they want. They have to follow the same laws that we do. And there are laws that have been made that actually limit and designate and control what it is that the government is allowed to do. Okay, so the government cannot do just whatever it wants. That is not a thing, at least in our system. Natural rights, you have life, liberty, and property. Now, who said that? That would be John Locke. John Locke was one of the English political philosophers that that came up with the idea of life, liberty, and property, that the government's job is to protect your life, liberty, and your property. You as an individual have rights, and you know, do those rights, and the government's job is to protect those rights for you. That is the government's job. Now, this sounds similar to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. Basically, Thomas Jefferson, when he was writing the Declaration of Independence, we're going to talk a little bit about the Declaration of Independence today, not a whole lot, but a little bit. When Thomas Jefferson was writing the Declaration of Independence, he changed property to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I think he probably thought that property sounded a little bit materialistic, and pursuit of happiness, you know, maybe property does make some people happy. Maybe it's, you know, doing a certain job or fulfilling a career goal or something like that. You have inherent rights, okay? Inherent means rights that you are born with and cannot be taken away from you. Something that is inherent is something that is like naturally, like in your DNA, you are naturally born with it. So, like a lot of times if you watch like a cat, like have kittens, that cat may have never had kittens before, but that mama cat is going to know how to take care of her kittens because it is inherent in her. So we have inherent rights. We also have inalienable rights. That is another thing that was said in the Declaration of Independence. Thomas Jefferson wrote it. You also sometimes will see unalienable rights. For the sake of this class, inalienable and unalienable are going to be interchangeable. So if I give you a reading that says unalienable, I don't want you to be like, oh, whoa, Baumgartner said inalienable. For the sake of this course, they're going to be interchangeable. Different translations and different transcripts of the Declaration of Independence and different drafts and stuff say inalienable or unalienable. So remember we talked about Thomas Jefferson kind of changed John Locke's meaning of life, liberty, and property to mean life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, the second democratic ideal that we have is popular, or third, I don't know what number we're on, is popular sovereignty. Okay, the people choose their government. Popular sovereignty means that people are going to vote. People are going to choose what is going to affect them in some way, or people are going to choose what the government does or who the representatives in the government are. So the people are going to choose their government. Okay. The state is created and sustained based on the consent of the governed. Now, what does consent mean? Consent is going to usually mean permission, okay? So you give the government your permission to do what it does, okay? That's the whole thing, is that like consent of the governed, that we give our permission to the government to do things for us, okay? Now, you might not like the government, but most people generally are okay with the idea of the government and what the government does. Now, you could go like shut yourself up in your house and never come outside and not be a part of society. Or you could go like off and be like a homeless person that lives out in the woods somewhere and not be a part of society. You choose to be a member of this functioning society. And by you choosing to do that, you are giving your consent to the government to be ruling over you, basically. So like if you say, oh, I don't want my stuff to get stolen, you're giving up your right to go steal stuff. That's you giving your consent to have your property and your rights protected. Republicanism, guys, this is the idea of the government being ran by elective representatives. I don't want you to think Republican Party when you see this. This is not going to be the Republican Party. Republicanism, you can think of representative government or a representative democracy. You vote for the person who will represent you and vote the way that you would if you were in that situation to decide something. This is the opposite of a ruling class or rule based on some kind of divine right or inheritance. Back in the, 1700s, 1700s, you had your authoritarian monarchies, that you would say, like, I'm the king because my dad was king and God chose me to be the king because he picked who my mom and dad were going to be, and out I was born. And disobeying me is basically the same thing as disobeying God. And if you don't listen to me, you're not listening to God. And if you don't listen to God, you're going to go to hell. And I'll send you there quicker because I'm also going to hang you or cut your head off or whatever. So this is not what we have. We don't have some kind of oligarchy where we have a ruling few or some kind of autocratic government where you have like one leader. We have multiple branches of government, multiple leaders in our government. The government can't function with just one person. And the people that do run our government are chosen by us. Social contract is an actual or hypothetical contract between the government and the governed. This goes right along with consent of the governed, okay? That you choose to enter into this agreement, okay? You choose to be a part of our society. No one is forcing you to follow our rules or do anything. You are, by being a functioning member of society, you are choosing to enter into this agreement. Individuals are born in a state of nature. Guys, state of nature, put a little note next to that. That is a Thomas Hobbes quote. He's another one of our English philosophers that you need to kind of know. So we talked about Locke, and now we're talking about Hobbes. Basically, he said that individuals are born in a state of nature. And he kind of gives this example in some of his writings that if you were born in the state of nature, it would almost be like back in the caveman times. And you're just doing what you can do to survive. You are, if you have to kill somebody to get food to feed your family, then so be it. It's the caveman times. might makes right, and if I'm stronger than you, it's your fault for not being able to protect your stuff, and if I take it to feed my family, that's your own fault. We're just going to kind of go bash each other with clubs, and do what we need to do. He says that to stop that kind of chaotic system from happening, people turn to a leader or turn to a government to protect their rights for them so that they don't have to go bashing each other over the head with clubs and different things like that. Now, where do these ideas come from? They come from the Enlightenment. That was in the 17th and 18th century. In Europe, philosophers, it was the age of reason, the age of logic, the Enlightenment. We had huge scientific developments, mathematical developments, art flourished during this time. And it's really where we get our idea of modern political philosophy that kind of gives us the basis for our government. So we talked a little bit about Hobbes and Locke. You also need to know Montesquieu and Rousseau, okay? So you've got Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the Baron de Montesquieu, okay? Hobbes, again, we talked about his state of nature. He says that people are naturally wicked and self-interested. You are more important than anybody else. It is more important to sustain your life than it is to worry about anything else, okay? You are naturally born wicked, evil, and greedy, okay? Kind of the state of nature is kind of like anarchy, that you don't really have any kind of system of government or system of control or leadership of any type of people or anything like that. And he believes that people enter into governments out of fear for protection. Okay, so because I don't want my ish to get stolen, I'm going to enter into this agreement with the government so that they will protect my property, my rights. They will protect my stuff. And I'm going to agree to follow their rules so that I am protected. Okay, he has a very negative view of life. He believes that like a baby when it comes out doesn't love its mom. It just wants to eat, and the only purpose that its mom serves is to like feed it and take care of it. That baby doesn't know like what love is, that baby comes out in a state of nature. One of his famous quotes is he claims that life is nasty, brutish, and short, but then he ended up living for like a very long time to 91, which at that time was like really super old. It's still pretty old today. You can at this point pause this video and on your PowerPoint that I've given you on Google Classroom, go ahead and watch this video about Thomas Hobbes. It'll give you a lot of his good quotes and stuff. We're also going to do some readings on those four guys that I talked about. I'm going to give you some assignments and stuff to go with them, so just be prepared to see those. Then you've got John Locke. He believed that you were a tabula rasa, or a blank state. You came out, you weren't evil, you weren't good. It was the results of what happened around you that either made you evil or made you good, okay? So you're blank, and whatever happens to you is gonna affect the way that you turn out. Kind of like that idea of like nature versus nurture that you might talk about in psychology. Are you born an evil person, or do you become an evil person based on your life and your upbringing and stuff? They love to look at like serial killers and stuff like that when they're talking about like nature versus nurture. So he believed that people are capable of reason and born innocent. He is really one of the first ones that talked about the social contract and defined it as an actual contract. And he was against the divine right to rule. That was the divine right to rule was kind of what I was saying about that, I am born the king because God chose me to be born of my father and my mother, and by disobeying me, you are disobeying God himself. He rejected that idea. He did not believe that. His book was The Two Treatises of Government, and here is a video about him. You can pause my video, and on your PowerPoint that I provided for you, you can go ahead and click and watch this video. Then you've got Baron de Montesquieu. He talked all about separation of powers. One of his famous quotes is, if the law-making and the law-enforcing bodies are united in one, then there can be no liberty. His book is The Spirit of the Laws. He was a French philosopher. He was really big in both the American Revolution and the French Revolution. And he really gives us a lot of our ideas about that we should have, you know, a legislative, executive, and a judicial branch, which is what we ended up with in this country today. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he believed in the separation of church and state. He was another French philosopher that believed in, you know, separation of power, separation of church and state. He also believed in the social contract. He even called his book The Social Contract. He believed that the best political unit was small, and that you should live in these like groups of like 30 to 50 people, and everybody should vote on everything, and it should be a direct democracy where every single person votes on every single issue every single time. There should be not one leader. There should be not one group. Everyone should be a leader in their own government. But in reality, our systems are too big. You know, we have 330 something million people that live in this country. We can't vote on every single issue every single time. But in John Locke's kind of theoretical exemplar world, that would be the best type of government. Now, the Declaration of Independence, again, we're going to hit on this a little bit today, and we're going to really get to the Declaration of Independence later on in this unit. But it was drafted by Thomas Jefferson. He also got help from John Adams, and Sam Adams was his cousin that was also a leader in what eventually would become the American Revolution. And it provides the foundation for popular sovereignty in the United States. It provides kind of the philosophical rationale of why we wanted to be our own country and why we wanted to be free from the British. The Declaration of Independence does not provide the basis for democracy or our government, but it provides the rationale behind them. The Declaration of Independence does not say we're going to have a president and an executive branch, and we're going to have Congress and a legislative branch, and we're going to have judges and a judicial branch. It just says these are the reasons why we want to have our own self-government and why we don't believe that the British are doing the right thing by ruling over us. The Constitution is what serves as the blueprint or guide for the government, and it's not going to come until after the failures of the Articles of Confederation, which we're also going to discuss extensively. So, the lead up to the Declaration of Independence, you had colonialism and mercantilism. That's where you had the British basically just making as much money off of us as you can. We're going to talk a little bit more about colonialism and mercantilism in your U.S. history class, and a little bit more in this class. Salutary neglect is basically where the British are saying, like, okay, I see you, I salute you, salutary, I see you, I salute you. Y'all do what y'all want to do. Make me some money. Do what y'all want to do. I don't really care. Okay. This ends after the French and Indian War, and when King George III ascends to the throne. King George III had a little bit different idea about how to deal with the colonies in especially the Americas. The French and Indian War racked up a big war debt. That was the 7 Years' War, if you're taking like a European history class. And King George really wanted to start raising taxes and different things on the American colonists. They started doing things like the Stamp Act. You've probably heard about that, taxing paper products and different things. That led up to kind of the Boston Tea Party. They had Tea Act, the Sugar Act, the Stamp Act. There were a bunch of different taxes that really got all of the colonists fired up about different things. After the Boston Tea Party, the Intolerable Acts was passed by King George, or by Parliament and King George. And that eventually led to the Second Continental Congress kind of forming. Common Sense was written by Thomas Paine. Again, this is a very much intro day. We're going to talk about a lot of this stuff as we go. And then we had the adoption of the Declaration of Independence in July 1776, July 4th, 1776. This is a good graph. You can kind of look at it on your own, that talks about the difference between the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. I actually have this posted up in my room if you ever want to look at it up close, or you can see it on this PowerPoint that I'm giving you. All right, that's going to be enough for today. Thank you guys. See y'all tomorrow.